the theme of today, as you all know, is Global South Perspectives, Refugees, Climate Justice, and Global Inequality. And we'll present you also 2 acts to make a difference. So first, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement and acknowledge that we are standing now at the land of the traditional ancestral and ancient land of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish nations, and acknowledge that we're here because of a result of colonialism, but also not only the things of the past, but for us to just encourage each one of us to learn about the current structures of colonialism that still continue, and how we're talking about climate justice today, right? And how this is often, for example, here in BC right now, we currently have pipelines opening in Indigenous land and territory without consent. So I really encourage each one of you to watch the documentary Inta. It's on Netflix, and it talks about the Wet'suwet'en and how the Coastal GasLink pipeline was opened there, and despite them not wanting that to happen. So and we can learn about ways in which we can help avoid colonialism to continue happening every day. And so we're going to present who we are. My name is Juliana. I am an international scholar at UBC from Brazil, from Rio de Janeiro. And I am a Bachelor of Science in Global Resource Systems. I'm a social, environmental, and climate action advocate. I'm a top 25 environmentalist and 25 awardee in Canada. And I'm a co-founder of a nonprofit called Construindo Futuro, in which we empower teenagers across Brazil to promote sustainable development in their communities.
And this is Farhana Roshan. I'm an international scholar, Rohingya refugee from Myanmar. I'm doing BA Bachelor of Arts in Gender, Race, and Sexuality and Social Justice. Also, I'm a Duolingo scholarship. I'm a Duolingo scholar, Child Champion Awardee for advocating for girls' education in Rohingya community. Thank you.
I would like to start with a trigger warning and just let you all know that we're going to touch on some sensitive topics today, including war, human rights violations, sexual assault, poverty, and climate disasters. So take care of yourselves, and if any of you feel like the need to leave, we'll completely understand that. So we'll start with Farhana. She will tell a little bit of her story for all of you, and so, yeah.
Hello everybody, my name is Farhana Roshan. First, before I start my story, I would like to tell little bit like a background about Rohingya refugee, like who are these people and from where they are coming from. The Rohingya refugee crisis has its roots in the 18th century when the Burmese kingdom led by the Burma ethnic group conquered Arakan, displacing thousands of Rohingya people. By 1799, over 35,000 Rohingya fled to British Bengal to escape persecution under British rule. The Rohingya maintained their distinct identity, language, and culture. However, the Burmese Buddhist majority felt threatened, fueling a nationalism that propelled the Burmese independence movement. After World War II, Burma gained independence, but the government refused to acknowledge the Rohingya refugees as a citizen. This led to military operation, force expulsion, and violation against the Rohingya. The 1982 citizenship law excluded the Rohingya from the list of recognized ethnic groups, rendering them stateless. The military government further discriminated against minority population, fostering a belief that Burma is a land purely for Burmese Buddhists. Recent raids and violence have displaced thousands of Rohingya people who continue facing targeted arrest, violence, and persecution in Myanmar, like in different countries, not only in Myanmar. We already left Myanmar just to save our life. Here is my story. My name is Farhana Roshan. I am a Rohingya refugee from Myanmar, living in Vancouver, BC, and studying at the University of British Columbia. Today I want to share my story, a story that is not just my story, but the whole entire community, Rohingya community. a community that has been denied recognition and citizen and a basic human right. I think many of you may not aware of the word Rohingya and the problems, challenges we faced from generations. Like when I am talking about Rohingya refugee, like there are lots of refugees as well, like all around the world, but there are people who are fighting for them. But since I born, I saw that we Rohingya refugee and like for for our community, there was no one like to fight for our justice. And then when I start growing up, like in a situation where I saw lots of injustice in between people, I realized that I think we are the like the youth, the children who is growing up need to like raise voice against this injustice, so that people get to like know more about Rohingya refugees. Like not only like here in Canada, I just wanted to like to know, people to know like all about Rohingya refugees in Canada, in like all around the world, so that they can just raise a single voice for us to just give us like our land back, our dignity and identity gave like back, because we have already lost each and everything with our country. So my parents were like a refugee in 1950, fleeing conflict and persecution. They left Myanmar and settled in Bangladesh camp, where I was born as a stateless person. And I have never been know the feeling of like being citizen, or like holding a nationality, or I don't even get a chance to enjoy the benefit of being a citizen. At the age of 1, my family was forced to leave Bangladesh, and then due to the conflict again, we returned Myanmar. Our struggle for survival and recognition has been ongoing for many years. The government of Myanmar denies our existence, our citizenship, and even basic rights. We don't have any protection. We don't have any identity. We are a stateless people. But our struggle don't end here, because as a Rohingya refugee, we also face discrimination, persecution, starvation, and famine in Rohingya community, not only in India but also in many countries. Still, my people are not safe. They are facing the same issues since today. Like in Bangladesh, Malaysia, every year we are just denying, like we are just being ignored, being like in denial. And like today I am just sharing my story just to um, hope that it will raise awareness about the plight of the Rohingya community. We are not just refugees. We are human beings. We deserve dignity, respect, and basic human rights. I also wanted to share my journey, like from displacement, like from Myanmar to Bangladesh. Again, like in 2012, the Myanmar government began targeting prominent Rohingya families, individuals, including my family members. My father, he is a taekwondo master, and my sister, she was a teacher, and my elder brother, he was a student. And like they started targeting those people who can, like they know that the educated people, prominent people will raise voice against them. That's why they started targeting those people for no reason. And to just save our lives, my parents made decision to like flee to Bangladesh, crossing the border in a small boat under the cover of darkness. I left behind with my mother and siblings, but as soon as we faced threat, we received like warnings that if you don't call your father from Bangladesh, we will be like set fire on your house. And terrified, my mother just took a decision, and then she also like took us with her, and then we crossed border at midnight illegally just to save our life. It was not intention to like break any law, but just to save our life. We just crossed the border midnight, and suddenly the climate change happened. Like during while we were crossing the border at midnight. I was very small, still I remember that horrible situation. And then the rain started, and then we don't had any, like clothes. We had just only one pair of clothes with us, without having food either. Even we don't had water. We were not like, there was no guarantee that we will be safe in that small boat. There were 12 or more than 12 people, and then we just um, sit on that boat, and then we crossed border. Luckily we were safe, but we like in the place where the border was like between Bangladesh and Myanmar, we were there for like without food like for 1 week. And then we got a number, like a phone, small phone, and like, and then we asked for help, and then we reunite like my family in Bangladesh. But when it comes to like opportunities, we like my parents never wanted us to like destroy our life by just keeping us at home. And then my father went to like school to enroll us, but they clearly denied because we don't have documentation in Bangladesh. And then again we took another risk to cross border from Bangladesh to India, so that we can at least get some like basic education to like survive. And then the same situation, it was also like midnight, and then we just, it was very like risky to cross border. I still remember, like it was very dark, and then we were shivering because if someone will see us from the like the in between border, they'll shoot us directly. But still we wanted to save our life, and then we crossed border. And then again, when we reached to New Delhi in India, we encountered new challenge. Without documentation, we were denied access to education, basic resources. We were not allowed to like buy property, SIM card, or open bank account, or access public jobs. Fortunately, a kind-hearted person came to like New Delhi and request like offer a free education at a residential school, which was very far from Delhi to Hyderabad, like a different province. And then we trusted that person, and then we came to like Hyderabad, and gratefully we began our new life. Despite facing language barriers, discrimination, we preserved and adapt to our new environment. And like I completed my primary education from Salama Residential High School, and my secondary education I have completed from Dynamic Success, the junior college. I'm just telling it like this is just a story, but I know like how difficult it was to like pass these stages like primary school and secondary school without having any documentation. And then I also wanted to become a and like Indian police officer, IPS, but my status of refugee was like wherever I go, it was like just I was just being in denial. And like due to this status, I was like not able to write a board like exam to become like a IPS or in India. Determined to make a difference in my community, I began advocating for girls' education in my community, and particularly for girls. With my parents' encouragement, I started conducting awareness sessions in Rohingya refugee camps, and then I become like I try to inspire as many people as I could from my Rohingya community. And then like after lots of struggle, I was become the first Rohingya girl from Hyderabad to complete secondary education from a regular school. And also like today I am proud to say that my community is making progress and education is becoming more accessible. My journey has not been easy, but it has taught me the value of resilience, determination, and advocacy. Also, like as being a Rohingya refugee, I have experienced first-hand devastating effect of poverty, starvation, and famine. Our community has been stripped of like our land, resources, dignity in Myanmar, leaving us homeless and vulnerable. I witnessed unimaginable atrocities women and underage were raped in front of our eyes. Many innocent people slaughtered, and children, elderly, pregnant women left helpless and starving. This is the harsh reality of the people of poverty. Even now, my people are not safe in India. We don't have a place to call home. We forced to live in camp in India, like without like scarcity of electricity, water, basic necessities. Like we can't afford like luxurious things such as AC, washing machines, or these things. Either I don't think so. Like my family, like the not my family, like the whole community have never seen these things, and our lives are constantly uncertain, and we may force to flee at any moment. We are not living, we are just surviving as a stateless people. We can't even enjoy like wearing fancy clothes, dining at like clothes or dining at restaurants, or our existence is a daily struggle to alive, vulnerable climate change, natural disaster, or any other calamities that can strike at any moment. Without proper medical facilities, we are surviving in Rohingya community. This is how we are living. I stand before you as a living example of this struggle, a treatment to the resilience of Rohingya community people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farhana, for sharing with us. I feel like I also want to show my positionality that I myself have never experienced poverty, even though I'm talking about these issues, but I come from Brazil, and since I grew up, I've seen a lot of it, and that has been kind of like something that has instilled in me my empathy and desire to act. And a big part of why we wanted to organize this workshop today is because we believe in the power of storytelling to, even though here in Canada, many of you might not be able to see all of this happening, that happens around the world, but by listening to people like Farhana, and she can tell her story, and maybe this can inspire us to help more and to care more about others and want to help. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Farhana.
for having me
Yeah.
here. Thank you.
So enjoying the empathy is good, but then the empathy works more when we can do something with it and act, right? So I'm going to present to you guys an app called Hibom, which is a way in which you can help improve people's lives and save lives every single day with one click. You don't have to spend even money for it. So basically, this app was awarded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as one of the top 10 most innovative donation technologies worldwide. And you can practice kindness. And the goal of it is to practice kindness, even though you're not seeing. Sometimes people want to volunteer in a way that they can see the people, like they're helping out, and the person can tell them thank you. But the most important thing is for us to do good because we want to do good, regardless if people are saying thank you to us or not. So basically, how does this app work, right? You can open the app, and then you click on collect ticket, and then you go to the donations tab, and then you can choose from many like NGOs and organizations that you can choose to donate from like supporting cancer treatment to providing like from health to supporting like to solve food insecurity to even like environmental causes. And how does this happen, right? Sorry, I'll continue. And then you click, and then you choose your cause, and then you click on donate. Depending on the amount of tickets, like they will show you how much, like the size of your help. So for example, 14 tickets, 14 days of you collecting it, equivalent to 24 days of treated water for 11 people. Just clicking the app, 14 days, you can help all of that. And like, this is my impact. I've been using this app for like a few years. Like I've helped more than like 1,375 days of fortification to children through this NGO, 288 days of access to medicines, and all of that might seem like just numbers for us, but for the people who are receiving this is the daily difference in their lives. It means that they can have access to medicine. It means that they can have access to food. And this is literally no effort from us. It's just one click. How many clicks do we give at stories or Instagram every single day, right? And how many clicks can we donate to someone who needs? So you might be asking, like, how how they get this money from, right? Is it true? So basically what they do is the more people who use the app, like these donations are like done by philanthropists and like companies who want to help, and the more people go on the app, the more they advertise that they're doing this, and the more they donate to the causes. So they need more people to be doing that, and the more money will be directed toward these causes. So I will encourage each one of you to download the app right now. Yeah, I'll give you guys some seconds to do that if you want, and you can already start helping people every single day. Or you can, if you don't have your phone over there, you can just take a note on Hibon is the name of the app. And yes. And then something that people also often question is like, also besides, I encourage each one of you, those who can afford, to become a monthly donor to an organization. Also with money, like this app doesn't require you to add money, but doesn't need to be much, can be $5, $10, but it can make a difference. And we know that there's a global inequality in the world of money concentrated mostly in the global south and in the wealthy countries, and we are in one of these countries. So, and the people who most need it in the world, like oftentimes where they live, there's not many people who can donate. So, but I would recommend you guys to choose an organization that does effective work. So, wouldn't recommend you to donate to the UN, but like you can take a look. There's a couple like indexes of the best charities to give. So there's this list from this NGO called The Life You Can Save, and they list the best charities that are considered more effective. So it means that they do more work on a certain amount of money, because a lot of NGOs, like I was talking to Farhana, asking her how can we help the Rohingya community and everything, and she was saying that the UN doesn't really help them, and a lot of times the money that gets donated to organizations gets corrupted in the middle of the way. So making sure that you choose a good organization, and this the Life You Can Save list is a list that has selected organizations who actually do impactful work, a lot of times in the global south. So I do recommend us in the global north to donate to organizations in the global south. For example, I'm a donor of Avas, who does a lot of work in like promoting policy and effective change. Yeah, I'll bring Farhana again to tell the connection between the climate crisis and why refugees are more vulnerable to this crisis.
Yeah, so like when I have already shared the story of me like from Myanmar to Bangladesh, Bangladesh to India. Also like my journey from Canada to like India to Canada. After completing my secondary education, I worked as a counselor for organizations such as MARI, UNHCR, Save the Children and others. I received exemplary award, but I knew I wanted to achieve more. My dream is for everyone to have access, basic need, human rights and food, and for no one to go hungry. I wanted to make difference in my community and beyond, which is why I passionate about becoming police officer. However, as a refugee, my dreams were constantly shattered, and like after completing my secondary education, I became like a hopeless. I was crying. I was isolated in my room because I was not getting like the admission in like universities in India. And then like a miracle happened to me. That was Duolingo scholarship. I was like selected for the Duolingo scholarship, and then that was also like impossible to like make it possible like without any documentation. It was really like a tough situation for me to travel from India to Canada. Without any documentation, it was very, very difficult. Despite like UNHCR and Save the Children helped me, and also like the Duolingo, who offers like 25 scholarship annually for refugee students all around the world who cannot like afford education. I was a part of that first cohort, and my advisor guided me to apply to universities worldwide, and I also got like 6 scholarships from like different universities from US and Canada. but I choose University of British Columbia in Canada because Canada is like a supportive on refugees. The process of traveling from Canada to like without document was challenging, and then today like I'm here and I'm like studying gender, race, sexuality and social justice at UBC because I wanted to give my people their justice back. I want to help us regain our land, our home and our dignity. We can live like a normal life. When it comes to like climate crisis, why refugees are vulnerable, like when I saw this picture, I literally like imagined like this was from my, like this situation happened every year during the rainy season around my home, and like the camp is exactly look like this, the dress code and the water and like everything is similar to my situation. Like my people are also like facing this kind of challenges, like they don't have any like a permanent place to live. Like whenever like the rain happens during like the midnight also, they need to like just grab each and everything and then have to like run somewhere just to like save like the life of small kids who are surviving in camp. And like this photo is very similar because I saw like I used to go to like these camps every day because I was a counselor. Also I used to like counsel like lots of people who were forced to like getting married at the early age in my community, Rohingya community. So like when we talk about like refugee people all around the world, whether it is Rohingya people or other people, they are very like affected with climate change because they don't like any refugees who are living in different countries. They are like very vulnerable people who are trying to get like some permanent place in different countries, who are looking for like a shelter. But yeah, these kind of like climate change can affect very much like in our lives. As I experienced lots of these floods, disasters around my community in India, like in Hyderabad, we used to like go to like their homes like midnight, and then we saw like there are lots of children who were crying just to give them like a blanket because they were shivering because of cold and like the water, the weather, and like which has like taught me that wherever I go, I will not forget like those people, not only Rohingya people but also those who are vulnerable. I will like in my life my goal is just to work for them, just to give them a permanent place so that they can call a place like freely like home. We are not safe like anymore, like not only like the Rohingya people but also other refugees all around the world are affecting like lot with the climate change.
So like Farhana was explaining to me as well, like when we think about, for example, heat waves and how oftentimes like refugee shelters are just crowded and they don't have access to like one bathroom and sanitation. So all these impacts are much more expressed in people who are vulnerable, like refugees. So once again, opportunity for action. There's this platform called Ecosia, which is a way that it works just like Google, but what happens is, do you know how Google makes their money? Because you don't pay to use Google. Does anybody know? Ads.
Placement.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, this nonprofit, they decided to create a search web, but the all the money, like all the profits, go towards planting trees, restoring, like hiring people, especially like in different countries around the world, like communities who are suffering from desertification and drought, and then they hire people in these communities to restore the ecosystem, bring their food security back. And so you can see that 227 million trees were already planted across the world, and 92 million already dedicated. Dollars? No, this is something else. But dedicated to climate action. All just by people searching the web. So I would definitely encourage you guys to also adopt that. So I'll teach you some tricks. You can actually add an extension to your Google Chrome. So basically you can search just Ecosia extension and then you add to Chrome. So then automatically every search that you do will automatically go to Ecosia instead of Google. And if you have Apple, you can go to your cell phone, your settings, and then you can put, you search Safari, and then you search engine, and then it actually gives you the option to choose Google, Yahoo, Bing, or Ecosia, or DuckDuckGo. So you can just change in your settings, and automatically you'll be planting trees just by searching the web. And another trick is Ecosia currently uses Bing. They're changing this, but they currently use the results for Bing. So sometimes the results are a little different from Google. So if you need to search like something very specific, you can just search and then you put hashtag G, and then it automatically goes to Google, like you search on Google. But then you don't plant trees. So like I usually just search everything, but then if I want something very specific, I just put hashtag G. So just encourage everybody to start planting trees because, like we were saying, the climate change generates so many social injustices, and a way to help is trees and nature-based solutions. So is there a thing such as climate refugees? That's another thing that comes up too, right? So yeah, like what would climate refugees be, right? Refugees that are caused by climate change, right? So if we think about, there's this island, this nation called Kiribati. It's in the Pacific, and they are a country that will be underwater by 2050, and all the 135,000 locals will be forced to move. So I will show a little small video. Ooh, oh my god. Okay.
By 2050, several countries could disappear underwater. Why? Because of rising sea levels. The most at risk is Kiribati. It's an island nation halfway between Australia and Hawaii, roughly the size of the United States, but only 2% of it is land. And that land is just 3 meters above sea level. Some of Kiribati's islands are already underwater, and half of its population has fled to the tiny capital of South Tarawa, which now has one of the highest population densities in the world. The government has begun a program to train citizens in skills, like nursing or mechanics, that would make them attractive migrants to other countries, and it's even bought a large chunk of land in neighboring Fiji, which says it's willing to host Kiribati's population. So will the rest of the world start paying attention before the people of Kiribati become the first wave of refugees fleeing from the rising sea?
And the list goes on. Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Maldives, many different countries and small islands are being threatened by climate change. And where will these people go, right? So is climate refugees a thing? Not for the UN. So currently, the UN does not recognize the status as of climate refugees. So you see this article they published, let's talk about climate migrants, not climate refugees. So I'm going to do a bit discussion you can get in groups of 4 and think. So the questions are, do you think the UN should regulate a climate refugee status? Would there be any reasons for not regulating it? What do you think are the reasons that the UN says for them to not approve a climate refugee status? So I'm going to count 4 minutes for you guys to discuss in groups of 3 or 4. Yeah?
Could you first explain what the UN's role in defining refugee roles is and why it's important?
Yeah, sure. So Farhana probably knows better than I know, so let me know if I'm saying something wrong. But it's basically there needs to be, I think, international recognition to... Yeah. Oh yeah, there's an international convention on refugees, and then currently it's because of conflict, war, political persecution. There are some reasons in which the person can actually claim and ask for refugee status in another country, but climate is not one of them. And does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So please, let's do discussion because we have time limits. I'll put.
Anybody find
I myself was not aware of how to implement the when I came here, but my advisor and I said how to so like I met with Mark Miller, who was Minister of IRCC. Yeah, and he was also like, oh, they were like, I was like, you will like not know about like that. I don't think it is good, but I have been very busy and then I
Okay, that's good. Thanks everybody for engaging and participating. So actually, like, some of the reasons why the UN does not recognize is they say that climate migration is internal. So most of the times, actually, like, people migrating because of climate change, they migrate to other territories within their own countries. They also say that the UN International Convention on Refugees, like, the countries currently in the world already have very little political appetite for, like, having the current, like, status of refugees that we already have, and they like fear that if we open up the International Convention of Refugees to include climate refugees, it might end up having the opposite effect, and they just removing current things and putting into threat all these people who are already being displaced in the world, who need and depend on that. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, just putting it to, like, for us to think about it. I honestly think that some of the reasons mentioned by the UN actually make sense, but I do think that countries like Kiribati, like very specific cases of climate change, for example, these islands in which there won't be internal migration because the entire island will be under sea. So then what happens in that case? And then they also say that if you do rely on refugee status, you're kind of like fluing away and depending on an emergency aspect of it. But they say that if those countries can actually plan ahead, like for example, Kiribati, they bought a territory in Fiji and then they're actually doing migration, like a planned migration, that would be better than just like on the desperate side of like, let's become refugees. But at the same time, we have to be very like critical and analyzing these things, right? But what do you think? Do you think rich countries accepting refugees, for example, from Kiribati, is it kindness, is it just ethics, or is their responsibility, like their liability to receive those refugees from countries that are being like disappearing because of climate change? So raise your hand those who think that it is like a responsibility or a liability of these countries. Okay. And now raise your hand if it's just kindness or ethics but not really their responsibility. Nobody? Okay. Interesting. So responsibility. So do wealthy countries hold a climate debt? So this is a phrase from the President Anotetong, which is the president from Kiribati. He said, "We never wish to be refugees, and we will be refugees if we don't start acting now." He's talking about climate change and reducing emissions, right? So Kiribati could become 100% sustainable today, net zero, no emissions. Still, they would still be flooded and they would still disappear, because it's not because of their emissions that they're disappearing. It's because of the emissions of all the other countries in the world and the rich countries, right? So you see here that he backed legal action against Australia over inaction on the climate crisis, right? So these countries who are over polluting, they hold a climate debt to countries like Kiribati. So what is carbon inequality, right? The concept of carbon inequality. So actually, currently, emissions from the richest 1% in the world, 1% of the population, are twice the emissions of the world's poorest half. So this is actually crazy for me to think about. And the richest 10% are responsible for more than half of the current cumulative emissions. So, and also at the same time, the global south and the world's poorest half, they suffer with 98 to 99% of all the climate change related deaths and 82 to 92 of all the climate related costs. But they're mainly not the ones creating this climate change. The global north is considered to have contributed to 92% of the countries in the global north, 92% of climate change, like of emissions exceeding their planetary boundaries, so their fair share. I.e., the global north is causing this problem and the poor countries are mostly suffering from it, right? And the next generations too, right? Because if we think about the new people who are going to be born, they have not emitted anything and they're already going to inherit this depleted planet, right? So not aid, reparation. What is a climate debt? So the concept of a climate debt is that the wealthy countries hold a climate debt towards developing countries who have historically contributed much less to climate change, but yet they are the main victims of climate impacts and the loss of GDP. So how can a country pay for the climate debt? So we're going to hear from this woman. I forgot her name now, but I think it's Angelica. She was the delegate for Bolivia on the COPs, and she's talking about the climate debt.
Anjali comment as we continue with the voices inside and outside of the Bella Center, where this.
Oh, sorry. It's not. It's from 5026. Sorry.
I'm Amy Goodman with Anjali comment as we continue.
Have assumed atmospheric. We are not assumed atmospheric, common atmospheric space. 20% of the population have actually emitted more than 2/3 of the emissions, and as a result, they have countries we are suffering. Bolivia's glaciers are melting between 40 to 55%. We have extending droughts. We are having the lowlands more flooding, and we are losing between 4 to 17% of our GDP in the worst years. That is climate debt. And what we are asking is repayment. We are not asking for aid. We are not begging for aid. We want developed countries to comply with their obligation and pay their debt. How are they going to pay it? The first part is to pay it through reduction emission domestically. They have really to fulfill their obligations. This is not money. This is not the part of monetary. They just have to comply with their obligations ambitiously for the first and second commitment period. And the second part of the climate debt is the adaptation debt. Everything that we're already suffering as Bolivia, as indigenous people in Africa and in other parts, that we can accept that is finance and transfer of technology, but not the peanuts that we are seeing on the table right now. That is not even a fraction of what they have used to save their bank. But apparently, finance and banks are more important than people and life.
Okay, so she basically explained it all. So how can countries, wealthy countries like Canada, pay their climate debt? So basically, one, drastically reduce our emissions now. We are the ones mostly polluting, and the lifestyle that these countries have is actually, like, the concept of ecological footprint is how many Earths would be necessary if everybody had the lifestyle that you had. And many more planet Earths would be necessary to sustain the lifestyle that the wealthy countries are having now, right? So, and not the peanuts. So basically the other thing is what she was saying, transfer of money and technology to the global south to help the global south reduce their emissions, adapt to climate change, and do a just transition from fossil fuels. So, but then she said, not the peanuts. So what are the peanuts, right? Like just the little amount of money. So in the recent COPs, basically what was estimated to be needed, the cost that would actually be needed by the global south to do climate adaptation and mitigation was actually $2 trillion. And the pledges from the wealthy countries were $100 billion, while what was actually needed was $2 trillion. And for losses and damages is a fund that was created because, like Farhana was saying, when all these climate disasters happen, like a lot of damage happens. So for example, I'm from Brazil. We just had a huge flood there. Literally entire cities were flooded. Like everything was lost, like buildings destroyed, houses destroyed. These countries, like, they need money to rebuild things and to like restart. Where do they get this money from, right? So this is the losses and damages fund. What was actually estimated to be the cost that the developing countries are having is $100 billion. And what was pledged by the rich countries were 741 million, not even 1 billion. So like the peanuts that she was saying, we're actually not paying the climate debt. So is Canada paying its climate debt, right? Let's talk about us. So Canada is the world's second worst per capita emitter, almost the same as the US, which is the first one. And the current policies from Canada are actually aligned with a 3-degree warming. And 1.5 degree warming, just for context, is considered to be like the tipping point, the threshold for like tragic warming, for like tipping points and like escalating impacts. So 1.5 degrees is kind of like the limit for countries like Kiribati for them to survive. After that, it's like, you know. So just for you to have an idea, Kiribati is 3 meters above sea level. Richmond, here in BC, is 1 meter above sea level. And a 3-degree warming, which is where we're target to if Canada continues its current policies, would lead us to more than 7 meters of sea level rise. Like Richmond, Kiribati, all these countries will be underwater. And the climate finance to the global south from Canada was rated as highly insufficient. All of this, the sources are Climate Action Tracker and our World in Data. And then if we also, something else that we need to talk about, our lifestyle, like in Canada, wealthy countries, is like the overconsumption. And what is its relationship to war, right? Which conflict, refugees, which is the topic that we're talking about today. So I'm gonna tell the situation that happens in the DRC, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo. So why did I put UBC first year residents? I'm gonna talk about my experience. In my first year at UBC, I would all the time be in the trash, getting things from the trash. Why? She's laughing. But why? I would see, guys, I found like literally hairdryer, like new hairdryer working in the trash. Like clothes with like price tags on, like never used, in the trash. Literally there was a donations bin first floor and people threw everything on the trash. Like I found like new bike basket, like with packaging and everything in the trash. Like, I don't know, for me, like coming from Brazil, I feel like this happens everywhere in the world. There's also elites in Brazil who do that kind of thing. But in Brazil, you go out like in the streets in Rio, you literally see children in front of you like begging for food because they don't have like nothing. They don't have what to eat. And it feels to me like all of these realities are concentrated in the global south, but people here in the global north, you walk in the street, like, except if you go like to downtown east side or something like that, but we don't see this reality. So then it's okay, let me just throw my hairdryer in the trash. But where does that trash go to? And like, you know, like for us to have responsibility over our consumption. So in the case of like the Democratic Republic of Congo, right? So cobalt is an essential mineral to make batteries, like electronics, iPhones, electric vehicles, and 70% of the world's cobalt actually comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And what's happening there is that this is driving like war, conflict, sexual assault, like child labor in mines. It's really, really critical, the situation there. And this is like a critical mineral that's probably in this computer here and everybody's iPhones. And like I know people who every single year change their iPhone because Apple just launched a new one. Let me get a new one and get my other one. And then where is all this electronic waste going to, right? And where all these minerals are being mined. So we have to be thinking besides just ourselves, right? So this idea of planned obsolescence. So we can think individually, like the power of individual, but we also have to think systems. And who are the regulators, right? The policymakers. Who are we voting? Who are the people who need to regulate these companies too? For example, like Apple, all the electronics industry, they have something called planned obsolescence. So basically, because of capitalism, like the more they sell, the better, right? So basically, they plan the phones to start to not work. Like we have the technology. If they wanted to make phones last much longer, they could. But on purpose, they update the software and everything, and then we have to change our phones more and more, right? So like we have to actually be aware of this and advocate for policies that don't make this happen. There's actually a phone company created a social enterprise in Europe called the Fair Phone, and they created phones that use fair trade mining, and they are phones made to last. So showing that this is actually possible, but it's not being done by companies because it's profit over people, profit overall, right? So also like the waste, we were talking about all this waste, right? So then you have all this extraction, but then where does all the waste go? So this is a dump site in Kenya, and it's basically just by closed donations, like trash from wealthy countries. So also fast fashion industry, like big part of like leisure of people here in like around the world sometimes, but mostly in the global north. It's like, let's go shopping, and then I shop, and then I shop, and then I get rid of, and then I have all these clothes that I use like one time in the year because there's so many of them, and then oh, let me just donate it and then throw away. And then where does all these clothes come from? So a lot of the times these clothes are technically like donations, but a lot of times donations that, you know, they end up in the trash. And these communities are having to deal with all the environmental pollution from all of this. And in Canada, I was gonna search up like where do Canadian trash go to, right? So actually this is a quote from Environmental Defense Director Keith Brooks, and he said most Canadians have no idea that after they dutifully drop their plastic packages and soda cans into blue recycling bins, a lot of that trash end up in landfills and burned in far-flung countries. So actually, even if we recycle and we think that we're doing a good job, oftentimes it just goes shipped to the other side of the country. So a big part of the wealthy countries in the world actually send their trash to global south countries. And what is the solution if we think about it, right? First thing, consume less. We have to think about our lifestyles, like what do we actually need, right? Maybe like buy clothes that are better quality and will last more instead of buying more and more and clothes that easily, like fast fashion, for example. Use more reusable products. So for example, single use like plastics, and if we can avoid all of that because it just generates trash, and where does all this trash go to, right? Like, and ban the plastics that are the hardest to recycle. For example, bags, heavy takeout food containers, all of this. So we have to think about, and are we electing people who care about these issues and who are gonna put the policies in place that we need to see, right? So then we can talk about solutions, possible solutions. There's this really, because a lot of the times, like a lot of these problems, if we think about it, it's really like a systemic issue, right? It's like how our systems are built, right? How capitalism Like it's made to be this way, like profit overall, right? And we have to be creative to think beyond that. And there's this idea of degrowth, which is really interesting. I'm gonna show you guys this video, which is for me just mind-blowing. Let me know if you can hear. Can you hear, or is it?
Let's say you have an OJ business.
Not too high, right? Can you somehow, can we increase the volume somehow? Here? Try it. More.
Let's say you have an OJ business. You buy oranges, sell juice, and create waste. And your super smart assistant figures out a way to make less waste and more juice. So now that you can get more juice with fewer oranges, you charge less in order to attract new customers. Maybe you expand your stand into an OJ empire, serving the entire nation with your preferred pulpy product. Pretty quickly, you end up with even more waste. Orange farmers are expanding production, and the people saving all the money on cheap OJ can use that cash on plane tickets, cheeseburgers, and more orange juice.
That's why everybody needs a lot of this. Oh, wasn't me.
This is the story of growth. But instead of orange peels in a stand, we have carbon emissions in the economy. As better technology and more efficient processes allow us to get more energy from a given amount of dirty fuel, energy then gets cheaper. And in turn, families increase their energy use. Since the products made in factories can be produced with less fuel, all sorts of goods get cheaper. And when people can buy more, they do. Very serious people guffaw at this inherent contradiction, pointing out that GDP is just a measure of value, not a measure of resources or stuff. They say that through efficiency, we can continue endless compound growth with less environmental damage. But so far, that hasn't come close to happening. In the last 2 decades, the only year we've reduced carbon emissions is 2009, which also happens to be the only year the world's economy didn't grow. But growth helps fight poverty, right? Not exactly. In the US, GDP has tripled in the last 40 years. But the bottom fifth of American households haven't gotten a raise, and the median hasn't cashed in on that growth either. So who's making more money as the national income increases? The top 5% of earners, the 1%, and the top 100th of the 1%. As for global poverty, you can argue that growth causes it to some extent. GDP counts money spent on new products in the economy, so one sure way for less developed countries to achieve growth is to literally sell things that used to be free. When communal orange groves that provide for everyone are privatized by a corporation and the juice is sold back to the community by the plastic half-gallon jug, that's considered growth. You could argue that the community doesn't have to buy orange juice, but if this were to happen with communal water sources, I think you see the problem. Or, when healthy communities get sick and have to buy expensive patented medicines, that counts as growth too. Basically, GDP measures costs, not benefits. But we can't just turn around and decrease the GDP, since growth-based economies tend to either grow or collapse. Half a year without growth is officially called a recession. Degrowth offers an entirely different economic possibility. Degrowth is about reducing our society's metabolism, slowing down the rate at which we use up all the oranges, guzzle down the juice, and shit out rinds all over the land. Instead of cutting costs to profit and grow our OJ stands, we make sure all our workers are paid well. Or even better, own the company and farm cooperatively. So we gotta charge a little more. But we spread the wealth around a little better so no one's excluded. We compost the peels for the community orange grove and take Fridays off to spend time with our friends and family. In other words, we don't have to devise eco-alternatives that accommodate growth. Instead, we can focus on improving quality of life. Now, there's no set script for degrowth. It might be putting caps on resource use and auctioning off limited permits to mine fossil fuels and distributing the proceeds evenly to everyone. Or it can be a job guarantee program to make sure everyone has meaningful work, even as the economy produces less stuff overall. People can be paid for restoring ecosystems, growing organic veggies, or taking care of their aging grandparents. Degrowth is urban gardens, open source software, and community credit unions. It's cooperatives for childcare and healthcare, emphasizing voluntary work to meet local needs. Degrowth, above all, is a cultural shift. The growth at all costs mindset divides surplus production into wasteful, individualistic consumption and reinvestment for growth, to make an even bigger surplus next time. Meanwhile, 2 billion of us aren't even meeting our basic needs. In Degrowthtopia, we share the surplus to live better, make rad art, and drink the finest hand-squeezed orange juice at our wild parties.
So when I first watched this video, it was a little bit like, oh my god, like just makes sense, at least for me. But it's hard for us to like find a specific way how to get there, right? But there are different policies that can be put in place, and just for us to be critical about our system and how can we improve it. There's a lot of resources online about this. You can search more if you want. But yeah, basically like from us to shift from our overconsumption economy of more, like we're basically, how we're working right now is we're extracting more resources like Democratic Republic of Congo, more cobalt, more iPhones, more waste, and like kind of that, and we can maybe do a more circular economy, like consume less, make products that last more, and change our lifestyle. Like, you know, we don't need, like the energy consumption of the world is just increasing and increasing, and we need to decrease our carbon emissions, right? So, yeah, reusing things. So basically, this is my summary for today, how you can help. Download the Hebone app, start donating to people every day, do the Ecosia search browser for you to plant trees while you search the web, volunteer, join the climate movement, donate to legit organizations supporting the Global South, join the Global Climate Strike, which will be, I think it's wrong, I think it's April 13th. It's on Sunday. Does anybody know? April 11th? 13th? 13th, yeah. Vote consciously, and more importantly, vote consciously for candidates who are committed to reducing emissions and protecting countries like Kiribati. So our policies here in the Global North has a big responsibility to affecting countries like Kiribati, like Myanmar, like Brazil. So we have responsibility just beyond ourselves, and just voting in people who are conscious about the environment and people. So that's it. We're open for Q&A.